In implementing continuous verification, our speakers Jayesh Singh Chauhan, Amol Nayak, and Praveen Nittimi explore practical ZTA deployments. Moderated by Nikhil Prabhakar. Please, let's welcome all our panelists with a huge round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know we've had some good lunch out there. Can we have some energy here? Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. Thrilled to be moderating this panel today on Zero Trust architecture. And I'm happy to have you all as panelists here. So Zero Trust, I know over the last couple of years, we have all seen how the traditional perimeter-based models have crumbled in terms of various different modern attacks that have happened. Also in terms of remote work, cloud adoption, hybrid systems coming into place, and all of these, right? And the whole question around trust itself has made us rethink that, okay, should we even look at it in the way we were looking at? And that's where the whole idea or the concept of zero trust came in, right? Zero trust is pretty much a mindset, not a product or a tooling or anything as such. So today, we have our panel. We'll talk to them about how exactly this is done, or is it just another jargon, or is it just a cool word that the industry has started using. So let's begin with very fundamental basics. Jayesh, so you've been a CISO previously. You have also been, now you're on a consulting role. You have your own company. Now, how have you seen any org implement zero trust in their company? To begin with, yeah. I think it's a very basic question to start.
A lot of people can think of it from a tool-based approach. Some companies will look towards it of let me go and get deeper into the context of what's the kind of entity I'm trying to secure, right? And build like a trust and verify, like trust but verify kind of a concept, right? I've seen different ways of implementation. Yes, tool-based concepts have some gaps where you have a certain bit of learning towards it. If you are trying to do this with the context of the organization and how the tool has been used, there you can get better results. But at the end of the day, it is all dependent on how your team is approaching it and how they are creating the whole concept of trust, but verify, right? And that's how, these are different ways I have seen it implement. I think it's up for debate on what's the better way, right? But I believe I have a take that if you have a context of the tool, of the organization, of what's the type of, like it starts from what's the type of organization, right? If you're a fintech, it's a different story. If you're crypto, it's a different story. And if you're B2B SaaS, it's a different story. And then you cascade down that how it is. Like what kind of least privilege you want to implement and have a balance between, am I going to hamper the business while doing this whole journey of trust but verify, or I am actually going to enable the business and make it more secure. So different ways to approach it. How you do it is up for debate, and we can always go deeper into it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very good point, Jayesh. So I know talking about what is the kind of model or what kind of company that we are looking at, right? What is the type of company? So I know Amol, you have worked in different varieties of company, I would say, in terms of the sectors. You have worked in fintech, you have worked in retail, you have worked in education industry as well. So how do you see them accepting a concept like zero trust? Because most of the times, the management is always very about security, how it is implemented. And for them, zero trust is a completely new concept. How do they take something like this?
Well, actually, see, security, we have to put it as a business enabler, right? And be it zero trust or any other thing, right? If we basically build a business case which actually helps secure the business as well as customers, build a trust of our customers on our platform, that definitely enables business to take a closer look at what are the options available, right? And this may not be applicable to not only to zero trust methodology, but any technology you take, right? Be it a cloud security or anything. we have to build a business case, put a matrix around ROI and justify the ROI. So that way, it is always, discussion.
I mean, that's, yeah, I think that as you mentioned rightly, it's pretty much like implementing any other security control, right? And to you, Praveen, my question is, there is already a set budget in a company that is kept for security, right? For anything that is newly coming up in the space, how does an organization look at it? Because you reach to companies from a different standpoint altogether, right? You're going to them pretty much like a vendor. How do they consider it, or how do they take zero trust? Do they consider it as like a jargon? We already have quite a lot of things already in place. We don't really need this, or what is the take that you end up seeing?
Yeah. So as you said earlier, this is a process, and there's no fixed solution that can help implement zero trust. So what would matter is any organization needs to start small and start with a targeted application, and assuming that they have decided to adopt this methodology. How do they get into starting a smaller environment or an application or a POC on which they would like to implement this, right? That would be like, I would think, a first step. Then a step would be like deciding who are the business users of that, and because for them the availability and the security or the user experience should not be impacted. Right? If you're trying to make this change as part of this transformation, then the end user impact should be minimal and ideally elevated as well. So that is something that probably one of the first things that has to be taken into account, so that just because we are implementing a zero trust, it doesn't mean that a user's access should start facing access issues or not able to do certain function that they were doing earlier. So that it has an impact on the end users, and the end user needs to make sure that their scenarios or what they were used to accessing before is not impacted. So if this can be the first step of identifying who. I guess then the other aspects of the technical aspects of what tools to use, how does it impact your network architecture, things like that can be taken into account.
And I know in terms of implementation, as we spoke earlier, that it's more of a mindset shift than just a product or a tool, right? Is in terms of, say, how an end user looks at it, let's say a developer, right? What is the kind of like challenges that you get to see with them, at the end user level, because he now needs to look at it from accessing his system versus the network versus any application or anything as such. So there's always a lot of friction that comes in between, right? Now, of course, for even the generic set of security tools, we do end up seeing such challenges that people have, but specifically with zero trust, what is different there?
Funny that you mentioned developers, right? Every time wherever I've had security, I would build structures. And every time developers would be like, I need the highest possible privilege out there. And everyone wants to be an admin, right? And a lot of times they actually have the need to be. So there is always resistance. There is no doubt about it, because we are now controlling access. We are having people accountable for their access, right? And revocation is also part of it. There'll always be struggle and friction, but enrolling leadership all the way from the top, you start that, hey, as a security leader, you'll have like, okay, I'm going to disrupt a bit of way we operate. It can, and enrolling that initially, it might look like it's hampering us to move at that same pace, but you kind of define that period. That if you kind of put it across that, okay, first 2 weeks are going to be difficult, right? After that, it'll be part of the structure, right? That there'll be better adaptation, right? Then that kind of leadership generally stays open to it. Then you kind of go towards engineering leaders, managers, etc. That this is going to happen, and you look at. It's important to identify which are your things which like business stops, right? If you are kind of touching a certain area, for example, DevOps becomes a very crucial place, right? If your infrastructure, something goes down and they're not able to debug because we have implemented zero trust and we can't understand, like half the time we are struggling about who has the right access or not, then you're going to struggle. As Praveen said, starts with certain areas, right? And developers, as I said, you'll have friction. What really works well is defining whether it's in terms of, let's say, developers are generally going to interact with repos, like repos, etc., right? Code repos, and you want to be like, okay, not everyone should have access to everything out there, or Jenkins access, etc., right? So you putting it across that, okay, time-bound access is a plan B. It's not going to be plan A, but first we're going to look at what level of access do you really need. Oh, sorry about that. Better? Yeah, so what level of access do you're talking to every manager, what level of access your folks would need? Okay, I need to have one person in my team to have a higher privilege access. Let's define that person. Let's define a backup of that person, right? But that doesn't mean everyone in the team should have a higher level access, right? And on-call kind of helps as well at times, right? That, okay, like on-call in the sense of higher privilege access, right? Then also telling folks that there'll be automated revocation, right? You can't do it the sad way that you have a manual person who's taking care of your identity. That's a different story. But automated way of revocation, and then they can raise a request again if they really need that access. That model really works well because it doesn't hamper things. And process of giving access, right? Tool-based is one approach. I'm talking more or less about an approach where you have defined your own structures and way to work. If you can make it as seamless as possible, because I remember one of the organization I've worked, we kind of integrated it with Slack commands itself. Like Slack commands were just access to secret manager, right? And Slack commands, time-bound access. Slack command, AWS secret manager, just an FYI. Slack commands which can only be run by just 2 people in the team, like in the security team. So that kind of helped reduce like responsibility of giving access to a few people, considering that even they can have they can be compromised also. So we'll rotate them. But ease of giving that access kind of helped us with the problem statement that developers didn't complain that, hey, I have to raise a request every time, because the turnaround time was really, really fast. People could just run it from their mobile app itself, right? So that kind of helped. So to summarize, critical resources who need critical access, they would struggle if you are kind of bounding their access on a regular basis. But if you can have a seamless access, like how you can provide access and revocation as well, that kind of helps you succeed really well, in my opinion.
Makes sense. And yeah, this is from a developer standpoint that we spoke about, right? Now, talking about the non-dev folks, what I also mean is your third-party vendors or your external set of folks, right? How does that work with them? Because your company, you have a specific set of time that you can sort of allocate that, okay, I'm going to teach them how this really works. But that is something that's expected out of a third party or a vendor specifically. So how would that be dealt with?
You push through.
Well, actually, yes. Right. See, every company has a third-party risk management. Right?
Of course.
And as a company, you have a process to evaluate the security of your vendors. Yeah. And then vendor has to comply if they want to do, like in India we have the data localization, right? So like in fintech specifically, right? So if your product is not supporting that feature, probably Indian companies are not going to buy it, right? So that third party risk management comes in picture, where we will doing a due diligence based on our processes and our criteria, and if the vendor falls in that, then we will be happy to do a business. Obviously there will be exceptions, but I don't think it will be applicable for that, because then your whole zero trust methodology goes for toss. Yeah.
So I know, taking the conversation ahead from there. So Praveen, I know you would have also gone through a lot of these questionnaire checklists that, okay, so you need to comply with ISO, SOC 2, etc., right? So has there been any situation where, specifically around zero trust, there were really in-depth set of questions that you felt, okay, I mean, these guys take their security quite seriously. Has there been any situation where, there were expectations that were set that was completely got you blown away?
Not really, but mostly around the concepts of zero trust, of least privilege, there are always questions which can be addressed without having zero trust as such, like implemented as a end-to-end system, right? So a lot of the concepts of zero trust are typically in most of the questionnaires, least privilege, things like that, but haven't come across any zero trust specifically, like while there are directives or general directions, like are you implementing a zero trust kind of paradigm or not, but not specifically around zero trust. Another area which I thought I'll kind of bring up here is the how this is a transformational kind of project, right? Like if you have to implement this as an end-to-end paradigm in your organization, other major impacted party would be your IT infrastructure team. You will have to implement robust network segmentation, and that might cause other disruptions as well. So managing that and managing how that can again allow your business to perform in a seamless manner, that would be another major challenge that I have seen companies go through. Again, it's always iterative. Whenever there are challenges, that has to get quickly resolved, like what you had mentioned earlier. But if you can make that ease of the fixing of the issue faster, that's what I've seen works better.
I think the interesting part is that you should always, generally we would think that we should start with our crown jewels and apply zero trust. I believe we should start with a lower hanging fruit so that people get a habit of that this is going to come in, because the moment you do it for crown jewel and it breaks, right? Everyone freaks out and they're like, let's not ever do this again, right? And then the whole concept goes for a toss altogether.
I know there are these new set of systems that are easy to integrate such kind of mechanisms. Now, how about legacy systems? You know, it's a big question. You know, it brings a smile on all our faces because we all know how tough it is. You know, to integrate anything, leave aside zero trust, right? And how are companies today doing it? Is there a separate set of guidelines for legacy systems that has been already built out around these, or someone's coming up with something like this, or the simplest of the answer is switch to a newer kind of a tech stack?
Oh, I'm going. Okay.
Yeah.
One thing which has fortunately worked well is a lot of companies are on cloud. So you're not looking at a legacy infrastructure. Your infrastructure is still working around these services which a cloud provider is providing. So that way there is a bit of relief around it. If you ask me the simple question, like simple answer, legacy systems are a pain in the wrong place, and but they are needed always, right? Because those are things which were built and no one wants to touch them. We can have a debate that should we move to the newer areas, like or newer tech stack? Yes. Is that doable or not? I don't know. I think like I used to work for PayPal around a decade back. Quite a few of my friends are here who have worked. And at that time, we were moving from C to Java. And they had a timeline of 2 years, which is just crazy. Like it started as a 1 year thing, but it was actually 2 years, right? So bigger companies also struggle with it. So legacy changes are difficult with the cloud, etc. Like infrastructure, it's because of the same service, the similar services. You can still architect them well or do tiny changes. It can be done. From a code handling perspective, you still have Bitbucket, GitHub, etc. So it's still manageable, right? Legacy code is, you can't change that a lot of times. So that's a different story altogether. But if you have a system which is a very unique, right, you need to have, again, I think a lot of security comes down to what context you have, right? You have to sit and understand the system, because you do. The problem with security is that people don't understand that you have security, you have no security, and you have illusion of security. People are okay here. That should not be there, right? No security is fine, but illusion should not be there, right? So if you're implementing it for legacy system, it should be done well. Otherwise, you just like you're
Just
in
to
a
add
fairy
to-
tale
Yes, Amol.
world,
Yeah, I was expecting an answer from you.
Yes, please do.
So it is always going to be a risk versus business case, right?
Yeah.
So as Jasmine, right, legacy systems are pain, but then it's up to the business to decide what kind of risk we basically want to handle, right? What is your risk appetite and stuff. So that's again a business case. Anand is laughing because we had the same discussion yesterday as well. Right? So that's there, right? Business has to decide how much risk they can basically, have with the legacy system, and based on that, we have to derive the strategy around it.
But there's no silver bullet, like no easy way to do this, no? It's
yeah.
going, yeah.
Because I remember just a couple of weeks back, I was talking to a friend of mine, and then he was working on a bunch of legacy systems, building legacy systems, like building into the legacy system. So they still use COBOL, and the code scanning tool was called CA Endeavor or something. I've not really heard of this tool anywhere out there. And I honestly didn't know that people still sort of have that kind of expertise and are still building something in the space. So pretty interesting to know that. And I think one of the key aspects here is, of course, when we want to look at, say, any implementation in security, we always tend to go with what the regulations say, what the compliances fundamentally say. Everyone pretty much looks at them as like a North Star, not exactly North Star, like a direction to head in, like a compass. Is there anything around the zero trust space as well where people refer to, or something like an NIST guidelines or any guidelines or any kind of a standard that's already been built out there for zero trust?
I think there is this NIST 800-207 standard, which basically talks about zero trust. There is a nice book which is kind of a story. I forgot the title, but it's around the zero trust. I think it is implemented by, it is written by someone who coined this term and worked at Google at very early stage. So there are few, documentation available which can give you the basic guidelines for zero trust. I think Cloudflare also has a very nice set of levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, which also can be referred.
One thing also, I think ISO compliances, some of the compliances have a concept of least privilege which you have to implement on a regular basis. Do they mention any kind of framework around it? No?
Not specifically.
Not specifically. No? Yeah. But yeah, principle of least privilege is, as you were saying about compliance, principle of least privilege is anytime you go through an audit, they'll be like, why do you have access and all of that. So.
Praveen, so have you come across any such requirements given to you by companies?
No, actually, as most of the panelists said here, it's primarily least privilege and some of the principles behind zero trust that are mentioned, but not specifically zero trust. Mm-hmm. Right? I think in the zero trust implementation, the most important aspect is how you're going to define and what kind of policy engine you will have, because that is your big change. Other than your network and your users, your policy engine should be able to handle all the context and the speed and the agility with which you need to be able to configure it. Right?
Got it.
So that becomes one of the most important factors when you're implementing zero trust. Of course, your business users and your network is quite important, but having a robust policy engine which can cater to, you're talking about checking the privilege in every step of the customer's or the user's journey into your application or into your network. So that it should be able to handle that volume as well as the complexity that comes with different contexts.
And do you feel that it's more of a continuous process, or is it a final destination that one company needs to reach at?
Definitely a continuous process. Because at the end of the day, it's about the type of resources and entities which are coming in your organization and leaving it, right? Mm-hmm. And also, while we talk about it from a tech perspective, we have to regularly enroll people in the organization as well, that this is going to be there, right? I think now I'm speaking well into this. Mm-hmm. So that is there. Continuous process, but you can make it lighter for you from a journey perspective by leveraging a lot of heavy automation. If you have that, the process is more seamless, right? Otherwise, it's gonna take a toll on you, and having dedicated personnel who are like having an identity team in your organization is gonna be always helpful, because they are now they will be the subject matter expert of it, right? So, and they would have more context of the organization, that how we have reacted as an organization, how hard it was the first time, learning from it, and how we can pivot around it. So that way it becomes better. And the North Star is always going to be that we are growing better in terms of access, while making it stringent, but not making it feel to the users that it is becoming like it has been stringent. I think that's the growth.
Got it. And in terms of say metrics, like how do you measure the implementation, in an organization? Are there like any success metrics or KPIs that you build around that? Okay, so this is what we want to reach. Amol.
I think the basic metrics would be, the policy adoption, the coverage, you can say. Like you won't be starting like all the department at once, right? So the coverage, what is your coverage of zero trust implementation policy is one of the key metrics. And obviously the MTTR and MTTT, right? Mean time to detect and response. Because it's all about threats, right? It's assume breach, strategy or mindset. So these two, MTTR and MTTT, is very important to, KPIs you can basically track while implementing this.
I was reading about something, and while these parameters were there, I also saw that how much you're automating it also can be a parameter, which was a very neat thought when I read about it. I'm like, this makes sense.
Yes, because, when we talk about trust, right, in zero trust methodology, how you build trust? Trust is based on attributes, right? That is where the user behavior analysis comes in. And when you have, let's say, 10 attributes, for example, if you just have the traffic with these 10 attributes in your SOC, humanly it is very difficult. So that's where the automation comes, which give you real-time feedback about the user behavior, which can be basically used into policy engine, which Praveen mentioned, right? So that's how the automation work.
Yeah, another KPI I would strongly urge people to look at is to have the KPIs for your privileged users of who are on your zero trust policy, right? So because that's where the largest chances of your breach can happen, right? So if you're implementing zero trust and have a specific KPI around your privileged users, that will be that is worth tracking and worth monitoring and making sure that you are covering all of them and then also fine-tuning their policy in the proper way.
Something I want to add as well, while we've been talking about automation, etc., please don't forget that whatever entity or resource which is going to run the automation is one of the most privileged resources out there. So please make sure that that's been guardrailed and logged and tested really, really well. Otherwise, you will live in that world that, okay, automation is taking care of it, but the entity which is doing this revocation has a lot of privilege. And if you don't put really, really crazy guardrails around it, then you've opened another avenue for any attacker to have fun with it. So
yeah, he's saying don't outsource it to ChatGPT, right?
Sorry?
You're saying don't outsource it to ChatGPT.
Limited really, really well. ChatGPT, then you have different problem statement altogether.
Absolutely. And do you somewhere think that zero trust as a concept itself, I mean, as the name says it, most of the folks in the industry feel it's an oxymoron. Zero and trust, and you have to trust something, right, in the network or in your entire realm. Like, how does this even like sit well with when you try to sort of explain it to your own team that, hey, we have to implement something like this where we are not trusting anyone whether they are outside the network or inside the network, but we want to ensure there is a mechanism like this, right? And have you come across any backlash or any kind of a challenge from within your own team when you try to sort of propagate this idea?
Fair question. Zero trust feels like an oxymoron. I think, Prajal, I'm going to bring your point here. We were discussing about this, and it might be one of the jargons which is fancier and sounds well and catches the attention, right? But you can simplify it and use it that we are trusting it, but we have to verify. And that kind of concept really works well. The foundational way, if you look at it, the whole trust but verify or zero trust, any way you want to talk about it, is at the end of the day, you would have to trust a particular entity, whether it's automation done by you or a human who is giving access or revocation, like revoking it, right? So it's important to not get carried away with the jargons, because jargons are always going to float around and you will play a catch-up game with them. That, okay, do I not know this fancy word which is out there?
Yeah.
But understand the foundation that we are putting, that security has always been a multi-layered concept. And when you're implementing any concept like zero trust or trust but verify anything, you have to build multiple layers so that it gets difficult.
Yeah.
Right? So it basically boils down for me in that way, that I'm solving my security around my identity and my access, and how I can create multiple layers toward it. But at the end of the day, you're trusting something, right?
Just to add to Jayesh, I think the overall methodology is revolved around the trust, right? So we have to define what is trust for us, right? Like for example, if you're a SaaS company, right? Which
Please carry on. Sorry. Yeah.
So, for example, if you're basically, every employee has a laptop, right? Now, how you're going to trust whether this is company's laptop and this is okay to connect to our application, right? So that is where something called as device trust, right? Which basically kind of a device posture, management software, which checks for certain criteria, whether it is the latest updated, whether it is running antivirus, blah blah stuff, and based on these attributes, the trust is built. Now, when you satisfy all these attributes, now it's a trusted system which can connect to the system, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's a very solid one, because my next question was around that. Like, how do you think these identity providers or these device trust signals or your behavioral analytics play out in this space now? Now that you've decided to implement zero trust, how do you think signals coming out of these different entities play out in this space? So, over to you, Amol, as well as Praveen.
so as I mentioned, right, it is all about attributes, right?
Yeah.
And based on these decisions, right, how you define your trust for each entity, you create the decision-making policies, right? And based on that, you take action like granting access, how much access, and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So, and then these signals, right? These signals can coming from anywhere. Like device is one entity, user itself is a one entity.
Yeah.
The location of user, the time of access, and stuff like this. So, overall, it's majorly the signal game, which basically goes into analysis engine where you already defined the rules, and based on rules, the action will be taken whether to grant access or deny access.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, what I'll also add is that for your privileged users, again, you can also go for behavioral signals, right? Like, is it a robot or is it a human accessing it, or is it coming from a service machine or coming from a user's browser, right? So that will be an important thing to increase the complexity of your rule for privileged users.
I think a couple of more complexities add to it, like your BYOD policies and all these things, right? When they start playing out, how do you then see, a concept like zero trust being brought in? I know we all already have, let's say, a principle of least privilege and all these things, but specific to this aspect, do you think things change?
I talked about device trust, right?
Yeah.
That is where it helps to BYOD, right? Now, it doesn't matter what kind of device you bring in.
Yeah.
If it satisfies the company policies, right, based on OS version, antivirus presence, firewall presence, and stuff like this, policies on the device is okay to connect.
Yeah.
Right.
Should we add like things like EDR to the whole equation as well?
Antivirus is kind of EDR, right?
Okay. Calling that as a whole thing, okay? I think you can add DLP agents to it. You can add.
So it's all depend on the policies, right? What kind of policies you are basically enabled to make this decision, right?
Yeah.
Do you really want a DLP agent sitting on the device to be connected to a sensitive machine or application? Then yes, you will check for DLP agent. It doesn't matter which machine you bring in. Right?
I know sometimes we think about just one thing and we like, but for the audience, we have to do that. And also, we keep forgetting that also that we should always remember what kind of organization we are, right? For example, like my last place I was at, we had fintech as well as crypto, a couple of things. So our agents and our trust on those devices and those users were dependent on which organization you are working for. right?
Yeah.
Because they all rolled out to one umbrella organization, like one parent organization. But you can be more customized towards it as well. Again, to make sure that security is not dragging your engineers or your development or your business teams down. Rather, it's trying to enable them as well.
Got it. Got it. And I think one of the, I know we are all tech guys here. When we sort of interact with tech folks, it's much more easier to convince them. But there are a certain set of teams in any org, especially your sales teams. So, there have been situations where security folks go to the sales team and then they set up calls. The teams don't attend those conversations at all. You try to implement a lot of security tooling and process and everything. They say, no, hell with your tools, hell with your security process. I don't give a damn about these things. You do come across such kind of situations, right? Leave aside zero trust, they do not even bog down for basic security hygiene for that matter, right? How do you then convince teams like that? Because I'll give you an example. So I was of this opinion that, okay, so you have state-of-the-art security tooling, then you are sorted, until I saw how data gets processed in the sales team. You will probably start shedding tears looking at the way the data is like just flying around tables, right? So in such situations, how do you handle such kind of teams?
I think Jayesh touched upon this at the very beginning. It all starts from top, right? So if you have a buy-in from top management, it's easy to, communicate the same to the other teams.
Yeah.
And to specific teams, I think everyone understands security nowadays. The only thing is they don't want to change the way they are working. Or they don't know how to what is the secure way of doing the same process. So when you go and talk about you cannot do this, you should have another option which says that, okay, don't do this, do like this, right? It's a second secure process you basically rolling out for them, right? That is what I did in my last company, where we changed the way sales team works, because again, PI data being handled unsecurely. So we rolled out from being a phone number as a primary key to a user ID being a primary key, right? And that whole process took around 2 months to build the dashboards on Tableau, on the technical side. But on the process side, it took around 2 weeks to let them know what is the new process, how to use it, what are your challenges, how you use certain dashboard, right? And we change everything in such a way that they don't see a difference. The only thing is now they have a user ID instead of phone numbers, right? And if you have a phone number which you get from an offline world, there is a way you can convert it to user ID and then use the system, right? So it's about giving them secure alternate process to change the unsecure process.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Something I'll add to that is enrolling the leaders is tricky.
Yeah.
Please don't use scare tactics. Rather, use awareness as a tool. The way you approach it is very important. If you're approaching it from a scare tactics perspective, that XYZ company got hacked and the business went under and we should be also going crazy, then you're kind of setting the wrong precedents. Whereas if you're setting up awareness as the approach, that okay, we should be aware that these kind of things are happening in the world, and then look at what can we do in our capacity and go beyond from there. That's generally a better way to enroll leaders.
Yeah, that's rightly put. So I'll open up the floor to the audience. Any questions from anyone? Yes, there's one question.
Hi. So I always felt that the whole zero trust model, in terms of implementing for let's say a small to medium organization, can also be done just by following some best practices. Not really a technical implementation where you have to go for and hunt for a good ZTA solution, which will restrict the access for all the employees, right? So do you agree that if let's say someone who crafts a very good best practice document, that should be good enough for a small to medium organization to actually implement the zero trust? Or do you really need a technical solution controlled by the admins and developers to be trained, or the people or employees to be trained, so that then you can call it as, okay, we have implemented the right ZTA model?
I don't think you have to be based on a tool. Best practice is a way to approach something, right? Given what kind of organizations are out there, what kind of at the end, some set of people are writing best practices, right? They're looking at what kind of organizations are there and and they're trying to cover every thought process around it, right? But something can slip through crack. If you take that up, and if you have a detailed enough best practice, right, which you trust, and then you're like, let me see how my company operates around it. Is it in the corner cases, or is it's actually fitting in the whole best practice concept? Then you don't really need a tool, to be honest. I think a lot of times when we were discussing here, we were like, tools, before tools, you have to look at the concept. If you have a better way to implement it without a tool, that would be more customized towards you. You might actually have more efficiency there, right? And then foundational part is that the concept has to be applied with the thought that, again, it's a concept which is going to rally your organization towards a better level of security. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, one more question on that part, because the reason for asking that question is that, even if you have a best ZTA solution deployed, implemented in your organization, right? There are boundaries, where your ZTA, according to me at least, maybe I'm not right, will become non-existent, because there will be people who will be having the access to those red buttons, right? And they can nuke the system, right? Where do you then implement zero trust over there? Because those people need to have the access in the crisis time. But at the same time, if they become rogue, then how do you control them? Right?
Yeah. So, like, you're spot on. You have to, at the end, trust someone, right? That's what we were talking about. So, again, it's about how you implement it, right? Where you put your trust into. For example, a lot of times, if you're looking at tooling which the company is using, right, you would end up trusting your IT team, right? Because they are the people who have admin access to everything. Now, you can choose to rotate the admins. Right? If you're like, okay, again, that's where the context of what type of organization you are, right? If you're a fintech where like you can be liable to a lot of fine, then you add one more layer to it, that I'm going to rotate people, right? I'm going to have more granular level of access. And then you are the best judge for it, but you have to understand that if you're a unique company, actually this is the foundation I started my advisory and consultancy as well, that if you're a unique company in a unique market with a unique business, silver bullet as a security will not work. You have to tailor it, right? And if either you have the right people in the organization, you build the right people, or you get help from outside, but tailored solutions are always going to lead you to a better place.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to understand, so basically zero trust architecture require continuous verification to understand if it is properly implemented or not. How do you do it with non-human identities like tokens and stuff at scale? Obviously, one or two is okay, but at scale, how do you approach that problem statement?
Can you elaborate more on type of identity?
Okay, so for example, you're using tokens, secrets, and they are being used in CI/CD pipelines. How do you implement like zero trust over there and make sure that it is implemented in those identities as well?
Okay. I have one example, but go ahead.
I think, see, this fall under the secrets management majorly, right?
So what he's saying is NHI is non-human identity.
Yes.
Anything which is created for automated systems.
So I was talking about the secret management, right? Now, what I understand is these non-human identities will need continuous access, right? So just in time doesn't work for this, right? What we can do is the least privileges where the keys have the only access what they need to do, right? They need work to do, right? And then second is securing those in a secure vault and having less permission to, administrator, right? Only selected people could basically bring that, zero trust boundary to that. You want to add something?
I think
I'll just add a
Yeah,
point
go
here. Like your engine, the policy engine that you use, it has to be able to cater to that level of complexity that you are having, right? If you are using a bunch of agents or AI or service accounts, that require multiple context setting based on the request that's coming in, then your policy engine should be able to handle that context. It has to understand it, and then it has to decide whether it has to say yes or no, right? So the complexity of your policy engine should be able to handle the complexity that you have in your organization. That becomes the most important step. Well, probably if you have very complex contexts and dynamic context, then your policy agent should be able to cater to that.
And you'll have to iteratively improve on it. It will never be like straightforward, but rotating things, etc., etc.
Do you think in a situation of an incident, do you think zero trust would act against the company itself in terms of access controls and everything else? Let's say if there's been an incident and then you're trying to look at what's going on and then you don't really have access at that point of time. And then you again need to raise a request, get those relevant set of accesses, and then that takes a considerable amount of time for you.
I think Jayesh also touched upon it, right? Automation.
Or seamless.
Seamless automation.
Adopted automation. Revocation is easy. Giving access, like revocation is still doable well. Giving access is how seamless. Like, I'll give you an example which we had done. My team had done it and I was very happy about it. That while this Slack example, right? Slack command, it'll also, Bitbucket, we were doing something around that access. So a Slack bot, again, we were heavily reliant on Slack. So Slack form was there. The moment you fill it up, it will create a Jira ticket in backend. Because compliance was asking us to do that. There was a fintech side. It would, while the ticket is created, another group of channel where high privileged managers were there. This was general access, right? Like a button would appear, anyone can review and accept. The moment you do that, a Jira automation kicks in. It kind of gives that access, right? So this was just like, if you look at it in terms of incident, either you fill the form, if you want to go by the same channel, you fill that simple form and you accept that whole thing, and the entire thing with the logging of tickets with description, etc., gets into place. So it just like doesn't take a lot of time.
And just to add it, in crisis, there are always exceptions. So you can always have, super admin access to do whatever
Get the
you
root
need to
user
do.
there.
Yeah?
Come down.
Because it's crisis, you don't know.
Yeah, so I had a question which is more on the philosophical side also. So zero trust, when it started, we started talking about zero trust, the whole paper and the books, all that came out, was more talking in the terms of everything zero trust. And now the ground reality is you have compliances requiring VPN access. You have setups which require you to have certain sort of accesses. So where does zero trust sit for you? What is the things that you're okay compromising? What are the things that you cannot compromise in terms of how you have implemented zero trust?
I think I would look at it as looking at different areas of my organization which are needed, different pillars, your infrastructure, your code base, your enterprise, right? And then define where everything will go for a toss, right? My crown jewels. And then cascading down on what are the lighter things, right? And there I make it, like as I said with the IT team, I was like, let's rotate the folks as well who have admin access, right? So it's about how paranoid I am and how much I am supposed to be paranoid. And the other part is I look at compliance as getting everyone to a baseline, right? If you're already operating at that baseline and above, then you don't have to really drive yourself via compliance. Rather, you can drive yourself with security in general. But feel free to add.
Yeah. I think I'll agree with you. Most of the time, what you ask is like which one is must have, right? So I think crown jewels is like one of the pillar in data zero trust methodology is data, right? So I think the securing data will be a very critical part of zero trust methodology. The other parts you can slowly roll out, but that is where it should be the first one.
Yeah, I think one thing also to add is, and a lot of us already do that, where just because you are a CISO or you're a leader, you don't have to have every access. You can live without it because you become that crazy point of failure then.
No, in addition to crown jewels, also your privileged users, right? That becomes the fundamental thing there.
Any more questions?
Diwakar is kind enough to give us his panels. Right?
I think one last thing. So I think in terms of closing note, let's say for anyone today who's freshly implementing Zero Trust in their org, what are the, say, 3 key things that you would recommend them doing?
One each, okay. I'm coming from a lot of cloud world. I would say infrastructure. Please take care of it and define that well. Do you want one per person or? Yeah, I think I kind of, while talking to Ananta, I said that, right? Look at context is always going to be your best friend. Understanding that you're foundationally doing it not for compliance, but doing it for actually worrying about security and building guardrails around it. The 3 areas you should generally look at is your infrastructure, your application code base, or how you're operating, like your container images, etc. code, all of that comes into, and how your IT team is operating. I think a lot of us play a lot of effort on infrastructure and how your code base, etc. is moving, but IT, I've seen in my experience, is a nightmare if you don't delve into it earlier. That's all.
Yeah, I think for me the first key area is the visibility, right? You can only secure what you know. So I think that is, that is where the shadow IT things came in, right? Which you don't know about, and those will never be part of your zero trust architecture. So, having this visibility of all the assets, users, data, that is very, very important to start with.
Yeah, I think if you're kind of starting out new, then you can also focus on how you can go on the journey of zero trust versus implementing everything on day 1 or day 10. So your infrastructure can be set up to allow future deployment of zero trust. You don't have to do everything on day 1.
Okay, cool. So I think this was a great panel discussion. Thank you so much, panelists, for being part of this. And I thank you all for being part of this session as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.